If you lie to investors, if you lie to your creditors, if you lie to banks, if you lie to customers, that's considered criminal, especially when billions of dollars are at stake. So I don't see him as being important enough in the crypto ecosystem to merit a pardon.
Break the cycle of exploitation, break down the barriers to truth, break into the next generation of privacy, break free. Free to scroll without being monetized, free from censorship, freedom without fear. We deserve more when it comes to privacy. Experience the next generation of blockchain that is private and inclusive by design. Break free with Midnight. Visit midnight.network/break-free. Looking for a faster, cheaper way to move money worldwide? Owlting, now listed on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol OWLS, is building the rails for stablecoin payments. Convert fiat to stablecoins and send money as easily as a text message. Learn more at owlting.com. CoinDesk Bitcoin Treasury Month is brought to you by Genius Group, a Bitcoin treasury company listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker GNS. Genius is building toward a 10,000 Bitcoin treasury and just launched Genius Academy, featuring courses from Saifedean Ammous and more. Start learning for free today at geniusacademy.ai. Genius Group. Genius isn't measured in IQ, it's measured in Bitcoin. Hey everyone, you're watching CoinDesk. I'm Jen Sanasie here with my co-host Nick Day. Well, tomorrow the appeal hearing for Sam Bankman-Fried is scheduled to take place. His lawyers are going to be appealing his 2023 conviction and 25-year sentence, arguing that there were procedural errors during the trial. Joining us now is former SEC senior trial counsel and partner at Moses Singer, Howard Fischer. Hello to you both.
Hi there.
All right, Nick, let's start with you. You've been reporting on this and you've been reporting on Sam Bankman-Fried for a very, very long time. Talk to us about what's happening here.
So the hearing is Tuesday, November 4th, kicking off at 10 a.m. 2 years, 2 days after he was convicted on 7 different counts of conspiracy and fraud charges tied to the operation and subsequent collapse of FTX. We all know the story. It happened. Billions of dollars were lost. FTX is still going through the bankruptcy proceedings. Bankman-Fried has argued in his filings that he was a victim of an unfair and biased judge, that his defense was not able to mount the full range of arguments that they wanted to. And so he's asking for a new trial, and he's asking the appeals court to not just, grant him that, but to also assign him to a different judge, all of which I understand is a very tall burden to meet. And these arguments are going to be very brief. There's 10 minutes allotted to both the appellant, that is Bankman-Fried's team, as well as the appellees, in this case, the U.S. Department of Justice, now run by former SEC Chair Jay Clayton. And in that process, we'll see, I imagine, the panel of judges ask questions and clarify details that they have anything that they're unclear on. And I don't think we're expecting any kind of ruling tomorrow, but the types of questions that are asked and even the length of the hearing will suggest, okay, here's what we might, expect afterward.
Howard, I want to bring you in here from your perspective. What do you think we're going to hear from Sam Bankman-Fried's lawyers?
Well, first of all, I will note his lawyer, Alex Shapiro, is a truly remarkably talented lawyer. She's incredibly smart, very aggressive, but in a strategically sensible way. And I'll just add that Alex was a year ahead of me at law school. She's older than I am. And one of the best compliments I ever got at law school was after making some argument in a class, someone said, wow, you're like the Alex Shapiro of our year, which was the highest honor. So Bankman-Fried has perhaps one of the better attorneys for making these kinds of arguments, but they're very difficult arguments to make because they're not arguing that the instructions on what law should be applied was incorrect, or though they are making an argument about the instructions given to the jury, they're making an argument that the way that which the court conducted the trial was in itself essentially unfair to Bankman-Fried. And judges are given an enormous amount of leeway in how they conduct trials, and appellate courts are very reluctant to disturb the way that a trial court conducted a hearing, because in all fairness, every trial court, especially one dealing with a very complex and long trial like this, will make some mistakes. And the appellate courts will strain to reach a ruling that says, well, we may have done it differently, but it's still fundamentally fair, and so the appeal will be denied.
Howard, one thing that kind of really struck me, especially in the recent filings. There was a Supreme Court case this past summer that came out, and it kind of, I don't want to say nullified, but it seemed to throw cold water on at least some of Bankman-Fried's arguments. Can you just talk, just briefly about how that's probably, just another, let's call it, obstacle for Alex Shapiro?
I mean, look, to be fair, this was always a very hard appeal. And one of the reasons why it's such a hard appeal is that this was not a case about crypto. This was not a case like some other cases that, like, for example, the Binance case, which really made some arguments about how we treat digital assets in the legal environment. This was a very, very garden variety fraud. He told investors, he told lenders, he told customers various things that turned out not to be true. Very simple, very basic. These kinds of criminal trials go on all the time. So in order to attack this kind of determination, it's very difficult. And clearly, Alex Shapiro has a very difficult and onerous task ahead of her. And we'll see what questions the panel asks. I mean, one of the things, as I think Jen mentioned, is that you could tell sometimes from the questions what the main focuses are and what the concerns are. And, and just for listeners who may not be aware of how Second Circuit appeals normally work, all of the judges will have read all of the papers. Their clerks will have researched the legal issues involved. They'll have had discussions about this. They will have crafted the questions in advance. They will have identified the areas that they want to hit upon. So one of the things you could sometimes tell from these hearings is if the judges are asking, if it's what's known as a hot bench, which is a bench that asks a lot of questions, and those questions are on a specific topic. For example, in this case, either the instructions to the jury, the exclusions of the experts, limits on testimony. That may be something that the court is looking at as the crux of an opinion that may either overturn the verdict or modify it, or modify the sentence, or send it back to the judge to redetermine the sentence. So I think one of the things we're going to have to be on the lookout for is what are the judges asking? What are they honing in on? And not just what the questions are that they ask the appellant, Bankman-Fried's lawyers, but what questions they ask the DOJ lawyer. So I think we have to be very careful in looking at the hearing and focusing on what the judges are focused on. And on the other hand, if the judges just let the parties talk for 10 minutes, and then at the end of it go, thank you, counsel, you'll get an opinion when you get an opinion, that tells you a lot too.
Looking for a faster, cheaper way to move money worldwide? Owlting, now listed on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol OWLS, is building the rails for stablecoin payments. With OwlPay, you can seamlessly convert fiat currency to stablecoins, send money as easily as a text message, and on or off ramp globally. Learn more about Owlting at owlting.com. CoinDesk Bitcoin Treasury Month is brought to you by Genius Group, a Bitcoin treasury company listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker GNS. Genius is on its way to hodling 10,000 Bitcoin in its treasury while educating the world on a Bitcoin-first future. Genius has launched the Genius Academy with courses from the likes of Saifedean Ammous, author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunell, and many more. Start your Genius learning journey for free today at geniusacademy.ai and earn Bitcoin-backed gems. Genius Group. Genius isn't measured in IQ, it's measured in Bitcoin. I want to zero in on part of the argument here. It's this false narrative, right? SBF's lawyer argues that customer money was not permanently lost. They say this narrative was disproven by the bankruptcy estate's ability to make customers whole again. I'd love to hear your legal perspective here. Do you think that will stand up?
So I'm sort of chuckling because as a former prosecutor, people made these arguments all the time. And if you remember, Shkreli made some similar arguments in his case, and they were very unsuccessful arguments. And the argument basically boils down to, well, ultimately, I may have lied, I may have cheated, I may have stole money, but when I stole money, I bought a lottery ticket. And look what happened. That lottery ticket hit. So everyone's getting paid back. That doesn't really matter. I mean, the argument that they're making is essentially, yeah, I may have done bad things, but the fact that everyone got paid off eventually means that they couldn't have been that bad. That's generally not a very successful strategy, because what the DOJ is going to say, well, that doesn't matter. You lied about your risk management. You lied to investors about the segregation of Alameda from the exchange function. You lied about the way you segregated assets and how you protected customer assets. Whether or not you ultimately were able to get a recovery for customers doesn't change the fact that you lied to all of these classes of people that were part of the criminal claims.
On the flip side, another of the arguments seems to be that Judge Kaplan himself was unfairly biased against the defendant. The first filing, which, now that I think about it, dates back to September 2024, so well over a year ago now, argued that he was making undermining comments and biting comments and just kind of expressed his displeasure at Bankman-Fried. What do you feel about that argument?
I mean, look, in general, judges are allowed to comment on the quality of the evidence in a case before them. Cases in which a court has been found to be biased, so biased that it becomes part of an appeal decision, it's egregious. It's statements like, well, we all know that the person is guilty, but I guess we have to go through this farce of a trial because defense lawyers have to be paid. Usually, the Court of Appeals will strain to excuse whatever the judge does. And to be fair, and I always feel the same way too when I'm representing someone in court. I always feel that the judge is unfair to my client. You always feel like, how come you shut my client down, or how come you didn't let me ask that line of questioning? You're clearly biased, and every lawyer always feels that. I mean, I followed the case pretty closely when the trial was going on. I read the briefs. I think that the appellate court is very unlikely to see the way the court was conducting itself as significantly problematic enough to call for either a reversal or a retrial or a remand to another judge.
Nick, I believe you were in the court actually during the trial, and I remember a lot of reports coming out of the court saying that the judge was very matter of fact. I believe some people even used the word grumpy.
Yeah, Judge Kaplan, obviously, he's been on the bench for quite a while. He's seen a lot, and sometimes hard to remember this, but I would argue Bankman-Fried was not even the highest profile trial at the time, because one of his other cases was E. Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump. Probably a little bit more prominent than, crypto person. But I think the argument that the defense is pointing to is there were a number of occasions where the judge was kind of reprimanding Bankman-Fried to answer the questions that were asked. This was something that came up again at sentencing, where the judge said that in his view, Bankman-Fried had been obfuscating. But also during the trial, the judge was asking the prosecution attorneys to hurry it up with the questions they were asking. There was this famous back and forth where he kind of snapped at the prosecution to get on with the questioning, saying, do you think people knew Bankman-Fried was running FTX, for example? I'm paraphrasing heavily here, but yeah, I would say that, you're probably going to see that the prosecution will say, well, the judge was short with us too. It wasn't just the defense.
I mean, Kaplan is a very no-nonsense jurist.
Yeah, I think we saw that when the trial was happening. We're going to wrap it up here now, Howard, but I got to ask you, do you think that Sam Bankman-Fried could be pardoned? We mentioned President Donald Trump just there when Nick was talking about what was going on at the time. You earlier mentioned Binance. I know the two cases are very different, but do you think that could be in Sam Bankman-Fried's future?
I mean, look, we live in a world where predicting the future is far more difficult than it's ever been before. And so I hesitate to make any strong prediction. On the other hand, I don't think that there's a groundswell in favor of Bankman-Fried. Again, this is not a case like Binance was perceived to be, where an enterprise was attacked or prosecuted because it was a crypto enterprise. And this was really a garden variety fraud. Bankman-Fried could have been running any kind of company. And if you lie to investors, if you lie to your creditors, if you lie to banks, if you lie to customers, that's considered criminal, especially when billions of dollars are at stake. So I don't see him as being important enough in the crypto ecosystem to merit a pardon. But again, predicting what will happen politically these days is, let's just say that there are a lot of things I'm happy to bet on, but that would not be one of them.
Or maybe you can get on one of those prediction markets to make those bets. All right, Howard, as always, it was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.